We welcome in Will Griffith
He'll
of the
never
Kings
block
Herald.
me.
What's that?
Will will never block me.
Never.
Casey, you've said some stuff that got me close, but I give you the benefit of the doubt. I always give you the benefit of the doubt.
My man. What's going on, Will?
I'm just chilling, guys. How are you today?
Good, man. Good.
Just happy that you're here. We haven't got to sit down and talk Kings basketball. For those who aren't watching, Will is sitting in front of a pretty impressive James Ham style collection of books behind him.
Yeah, man.
Do you have and of course you're a writer for the Kings Herald. Do you have a favorite book of the ones that are behind you?
Oh man. Well, I got Jerry's here and I always hype Jerry up. So, but no, in terms of I'll give you what I'm reading right now that I really love. It's called Hoop Roots by John Edgar Wideman. It's a really, really gorgeous tale of a man at the end of he's accepting that he can't play basketball any longer. And it ties in race and it ties in him getting a divorce after so many years and his family. And it's absolutely by far, without a doubt, the best book about basketball I've ever read. And I was listening to you, Damien, talk about how you messed up on some box jumps and I know Casey, you still hoop a little bit, but you still aren't the player that you were at Consumnus, right?
Nah.
And reading that, it brought me to tears a couple of times in terms of like accepting when it's over and like what kind of basketball player you can be. For him, it was 60, but for me, it was 27, 28, 29. I was like, yeah, this is probably the end for my Achilles.
Yeah, Will, you're not selling me on this book because I don't want to read. I don't want to face my reality. Will be like, yeah, I don't want
to. That's my role in this basketball sphere, guys. I bring you back to reality a little bit.
What do we need to read that for? I live that every day. Like I live that every day. I get on the foam roller for 25 minutes just so I can jog. I read a book about it. Write a book about it.
You won't get it till you read it. I'll tell you that much.
I hope I play till I'm 60.
Okay, Tom Caraway right there you going up Brady and go Tom Brady talking about playing till he's 50. Kenny's going, I won't play till I'm 60. We saw you getting shots up over there on Instagram, man. Will, I want to ask you a question. I asked Kenny earlier and we had a discussion about here in the chat and of course on the show. Give me one reason that you think this Sacramento Kings team can make the postseason this year.
Ooh. Well, I'll give you one. It'll be Mike Longobardi. He's the new defensive coordinator for the Kings. We've basically, I've heard you guys talk about it before, that if the Kings are 27th in defense this year, they're in the lottery. They're not going anywhere but treading water at the very best. He's won a championship in Cleveland as recently as 2016 with Tristan Thompson, I think. He won one in Boston under Tom Thibodeau, as Tom Thibodeau was the defensive coordinator there in Boston at the time with Doc Rivers. He knows his stuff. He's Mr. Defense is a nickname of his. If the Kings are going to go anywhere, we do need them to be, again, middle of the pack. They were 11th in points per game. They were 10th in pace. They were 11th in offensive efficiency rating. They're fine on the offensive end. But if they're going to win, anything, if they're going to go to the postseason or to the playoffs, now that we have to distinguish those two as separate things, it's going to be on the back of a guy who's a defensive coordinator and a good one at that.
And see, I'm drawing a blank right here. What was my man's name that was the assistant last year?
Rex Kalamian.
I feel like Rex Kalamian had the same type of resume and accolades coming in as the type of defensive coach that he was, and for whatever reason, my thinking was they just didn't have the right personnel and the right horses to do maybe what he wanted to execute. Or hell, Luke Walton said, just guard for 2 dribbles. They didn't even have the personnel to guard for 2 dribbles. Sure. I think maybe the combination of a new voice, and I think Rex is going to go. I think he's with the Clippers or whoever he goes. He's going to do what he's done his entire career, be a great defensive coach. But having a new voice in there, with the combination of the right horses in there. That's the bigger aspect for me. They have a team that is structured, in my opinion, to play defense at a higher level than they did last year. And I think that's going to be the reason for them being a better defensive team.
I think the roster, I'm one of those people. I am the Debbie Downer that does see the roster as imbalanced. Casey, I will say that you two talking it up and hyping the season up has kept me from writing a couple of articles that it was much more of a punch to the stomach than a pat on the back for the Kings this last off season. But I don't see the Kings necessarily as a finished product yet. I do think that there are some holes that they're going to have to get creative and fill. And you had Matt George on yesterday, I believe, or the day before.
Mm-hmm.
And he was talking about how he felt like Luke Walton wasn't going to go any further than 8 guys on a particular night. And if you want a defensive you want that defensive versatility, you might have to stretch to 9 or 10 guys to get there because you leave out some important guys and some defensive players. If I don't know where you guys rank your top 8 guys outside of Fox, Halley, Barnes, and Holmes, but you might have to sacrifice some offense for defense at times, and I'm curious to see how the Kings pull that off this year.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing to think about, Will, because it's obviously there's Davion after that, and then depending on the line, I mean, Buddy's in there somewhere. Depending on the lineup that you go with,
depending on who you ask.
Sure. And then
most people except for Kenny, it would be Terrence Davis before Buddy Hield. Buddy would be in the Kyle Guy role if Kenny Caraway had his way.
But then you're
only a slight exaggeration.
Tristan Thompson is your 8th guy.
Yeah.
Where does Marvin Bagley play? Is he gonna, if he gets those starter minutes, you're gonna need a Tristan Thompson in there at some point, which means Alex Len is sitting out, Mo Harkless, Freeport Metu. Which one are you guys leaving out there in that case?
Well, I think the bigger question is not if Marvin Bagley is starting, but what if he's not?
Yeah.
Like if Marvin Bagley isn't starting, then how does he get worked in? And more importantly, like we keep talking about, starters top 7, 8, 9, different things like that. I'm looking at more like, because I know this is one thing that can drive players nuts, especially a veteran player like, say, Tristan Thompson, for example, is how consistent are your minutes?
Sure.
Like, are you legitimately a 12 to 15 minute player a night in which every night you're playing 12 to 15 minutes? Or are you playing 30 minutes one night and then you're not playing for the next 2 games?
I'm nervous that's the Tristan Thompson role. He'll kind of show a Hassan Whiteside style role where he plays a lot in the beginning of the year, maybe try to help to get him off to a quick start with his rebounding or with his defensive versatility, and then pull him. And then the Kings wind up wherever they wind up.
So let me ask you this then, Will. All the things that we're talking about, doesn't that lend itself to saying that they actually do have a deep roster and they are versatile? Because if they, in my opinion, if they didn't have a versatile roster, they wouldn't be able to not play Tristan Thompson for 2. Like, he's the best you have to play him. But they can say, all right, this matchup, that doesn't really work for Tristan. So the next 2 matchups might not work. So Tristan, your minutes are going to come back a little bit, and we're going to go a little smaller with Bagley at the 5 or whatever the case may be. Doesn't that type of thought process lend to the fact that they are more versatile than people give them credit for right now?
Yeah, I think you're not wrong in that regard, but I wouldn't necessarily call it depth as much as I'd call it maybe width. They've got guys that kind of like Alex Len and Tristan Thompson. They play different roles, but they could, you could swap one for the other depending on the matchups.
Mm-hmm.
I don't necessarily see them. It's not a bad thing, Casey, I guess. I'm trying to think here for a second here and how I want to phrase this. They've got different looks for different guys. And in that way, yeah, they have some depth to them. I don't think the quality of the guy is nearly good enough, for the talent level on the team is close enough to call them necessarily deep. And that's not necessarily a strike against Monty McNair. He's assembled the roster he wants to assemble, obviously. Mm-hmm. But if they're versatile, they're not necessarily deep, I guess is what I would say.
Maybe it's better stated he assembled the roster he could.
Sure.
Because, I mean, we know very publicly he tried to do something else twice.
Sure.
And it didn't work for reasons that have nothing to do with him. But one thing that I really like about those, obviously the Dante DiVincenzo deal and the Kyle Kuzma, Mo Harkless, Kyle Kuzma, Montrezl Harrell thing that fell apart is it fit the direction of what Monty is trying to establish. So maybe he didn't get those three players, and maybe more in particular, DiVincenzo and Montrezl Harrell. He didn't get those two guys, but he still continued to build the team in his vision. And it's part of the reason that I've always been okay with the thought of Ben Simmons. Sure. Which, if you were ever curious if Ben Simmons in Philadelphia is dead and buried, go see what Joel Embiid had to say today. But that was one of the reasons I was always like, no, I'm okay with this deal. I'm okay with this move. If the pieces work, is because Ben Simmons, to me, fits that vision of what Monty McNair has been trying to establish here with this current Kings roster.
I think he slots in too at a spot where the Kings would use him naturally. I think they would use him and Harrison Barnes as kind of a 3.5, each one of them switching. Maybe Ben is more of a small forward trying to go downhill on the offense as a 3, and then on the defensive end picking up as a 4. I think that that whole kind of that they have in the roster right now was probably meant for Kyle Kuzma, but Ben Simmons slots in there really well. Now that being said, the team is currently constructed. I don't really see them as having outside of Harrison Barnes, who in my mind is better off as a small ball 4. I don't really see them having a small forward that can play starting minutes on a nightly basis. I do think Buddy Hield is still a shooting guard, and I think Mo Harkless is probably a small ball 4 as well. And Lou King is, I don't see him as anything above replacing, medium dog Glenn Robinson III. So right now we do, you can slot them in. You can play Harrison Barnes and he'll do fine. He played a lot of his career there. But as he gets older, I think they want to use him more and more. And as the season goes on, he'll be played more and more as the 4. But then that leaves, okay, we're going to play Buddy at the 3. And then we've got that rebounding problem and that defensive problem we had before. And if you start Marvin like Casey so desperately wants, then we might end up seeing Buddy come off the bench. And I don't know how that works either with Davion Mitchell.
So here's what I'll say about that, and kind of the questions that I have when people say that. Who does have an adequate starting 3 on the bench? There's not a lot of teams that have that. So when you say, Harrison Barnes, let's just put him at the 3, and they're like, well, you put him there. If you move him to the 4, you don't have no starter at the 3 after that. Number one, that's why you shouldn't put him at the 4. Number 2, like if LeBron James goes down, who is a starter caliber behind him at the 3 for the Lakers? Like there's not a lot of people with that type of roster in the league in general. You know what I mean? But you have the guy that is there. He's good enough. I think Harrison Barnes is good enough as a 3 for the team to help the team be successful.
And just to answer your question about the Lakers, I think Talen Horton-Tucker would do it. I think they've got guys like Kent Bazemore who could do it, who played kind of a small ball 3 for us too. And we just, in my mind, I've watched you for the last few weeks, Casey, and you've convinced me slightly. And that's a difficult thing to do at my age. I'm a curmudgeon for the most part, and it's hard for me. You got to prove it. But you guys have worn me down to the point where I was gearing up for a pretty hefty article about like, hey, maybe we need to slow our roll. And I watched you two. I shouldn't have before I started writing it. And I went at the end of it. I went, yeah, I'm not going to write this. I kind of buy into it a little bit. So
I think we have a new show slogan though. Dealing with KC, we'll wear you down.
You will. It's difficult to watch you guys and not get at least a little bit hyped up for the season.
Yeah. Well, look, the thing about that though as well is I can see the other side. Yeah. I just feel I expect them to be, regardless of what the season was or what it was or the win total or whatever, they were 2 games out of a playoff spot last season. I expect this team to be at least 3 games better. It's not be the 5th seed, you're straight in there. But what they have on this roster compared to what they started with last year, they should be 3 games better. De'Aaron Fox being there, being better. If he can stay, if everybody stays healthy, they should be 3 to 4 games better than what they were last year.
I can see them picking up 3 wins. My fear is that it won't outpace what other teams have done in the offseason. You know, Tom Ziller had an article today where he ranked Western Conference teams, and he ranked guys around the Kings as the Pelicans, the Timberwolves, the Spurs, and right above them, the Warriors and Grizzlies. The Warriors, depending on how Clay is feeling, you know, how he comes back. And I think New Orleans, just on paper, is a better team. They got a coach that I think is going to do better than the last season calamity that they had. They've got 2 guys that are clear-cut all-stars. Are right. I mean, Brandon Ingram is right there as an all-star for the next few years. The Timberwolves are a team that, even though they're kind of a mess and they've been a mess, Chris Finch did push them to a little bit better in the second half of the season to that win record. I think that the only one that I'm like kind of ho-humming about is the Spurs, and they've got Greg Popovich. And I'll never ever root against Greg Popovich, and like in terms of like I'm not betting against him until he's dead and in the grave. And even then, the ghost of Greg Popovich could probably coach a team like the Kings to 40 wins.
Yeah, he's so him and the Spurs are done. They're finished. We ain't got to worry about them no more.
I'm not going to go that far.
They lost their best player.
I'm not going to disagree with you either. I'm not going to disagree with you. I'd rather see it than proclaim it. Like with the Spurs, I'd rather.
I'll say it with my chest
because I think they could be a top 5 defense.
Calm your chest down.
They'll be the inverse of the Kings. They'll have a top 5 defense and they'll have a bottom 2, offense. But
did Zilla write anything positive about the Kings?
I think he said that the Kings had he ranked them in S, A, B, C, D, and F tiers. And I think what Ziller said, if I can remember correctly, is that the Kings have enough to reach up into the 8th or 9th spot. And he felt like with this current roster, but it all depends on, I want to say he said Luke Walton as a coach and De'Aaron Fox's rise, but don't quote me on that one.
I don't understand. By the way, Will Griffith at the Kings Herald joining us, not just a tremendous writer on the Kings Herald, also host the great Kings Herald show with Jerry Reynolds, which our man Tony Zipteris, just really, really good stuff. Really good stuff from you, Will, Tony, and Jerry. But really good stuff from the entire crew over at the Kings Herald. If you're not following them or checking in with them for your daily Kings news now that the season's here, you're severely missing out. I don't understand any sort of praise whatsoever for Minnesota. Like you talk about teams that haven't earned it. Like I get people look down at the Kings because it's like, oh, it's the Kings. Yo, look at what just happened with the Timberwolves. But you're holding on to Karl Anthony Towns. Cool. I like Cat. He can go. We got De'Aaron Fox. Well, we got D'Angelo Russell. That's a little suspect. I think he's good. But okay, we've got pieces here too. I don't understand why Minnesota seems to be completely immune to the criticism that I really think that they deserve.
I think it's a matter of one. It's you get tired of beating a dead horse. At some point, the horse is just a puddle on the ground, and you're like, okay, I can't beat this anymore. So you leave him alone. And Minnesota, outside of one season of Jimmy Butler, has pretty much been a dead horse. And so it's like, what are we going to talk about with the Minnesota Timberwolves?
Well, they sure as hell don't get tired of beating down Sacramento.
That's true.
Sacramento.
That's true. I mean, and now credit to Minnesota Timberwolves fans. They're a lot like Kings fans in the sense that they beat up Timberwolves management and players more than just about anybody. They hold those guys to a high standards, and they have no reason to for the last, for their entire existence, pretty much outside of KG. But Chris Finch last year, they ended with a record of 8-6. I think that gives them a little bit of leeway there. Anthony Edwards is somebody who could be the next Tracy McGrady. I mean, I love that kid, but D'Lo and Cat and him, if he improves, they've made some heady decisions in the last few years in terms of the draft and picking up guys that were kind of cast-offs. But you're right. I mean, I think you're right in that regard. I just don't see them as that much worse than the Kings at this point.
All right, I got you. Will, got to ask you about this. One of the things that I've talked about a number of times throughout the week, and probably adds to the fact that I see the Kings different than certain people, is I still believe in Marvin Bagley. And we all know the injury issues are on the forefront. But If he can find a way to overcome that, I think, to be honest with you, everything that we just talked about with the roster, Marvin Bagley is the missing piece. Marvin Bagley is the missing piece of the puzzle that will catapult this team to where they want to go this year and possibly beyond if he could play 71, 75 games in a season. Are you still on that same wave where you believe in what Marvin Bagley can be? Or if you thrown in the white towel, you're like, it's not going to happen for this young man, at least here.
Certainly. I think that last inclusion there is important. Doing the podcast with Jerry has been a beautiful thing for me, and it has really opened me up to different ideas, because Jerry's kind of an old school guy and he's been around the league for a long, long time. And he's of the opinion about not just Marvin, but other players, that most people probably need a trade to fully unlock who they are as a player, or as a wake-up call. And for me, for a long time, that's been my only recourse with Marvin. Like, I do hope that he shuts us up this year. I'm fully on the bandwagon of, if Marvin Bagley averages 18-9 or 20-10 and plays 72 games, the Kings are going to make the playoffs. I fully expect that if that's the case, even with his limited defense, if the Kings have got a power forward who can do that, that opens up a lot for Harrison Barnes to be able to move back to the 3. It fills a lot of holes. I don't know if he can do that with the Kings. Now, I also think that Kings fans can be a little petty sometimes, and they can hold, he said everything right during media day, that this is the team he's playing for, that he as long as he's in a Kings jersey, he's playing for the Kings. And I believe him when he says that. I think somebody maybe got into his ear a little bit and got into Dad's ear a little bit and said, shut the hell up and let the kid make a career for himself. I just don't know. I just don't know if he's willing to accept that, like, not his part of the blame necessarily, but that part of the thing that happened was he got injured, that he's not been available, and Kings fans are frustrated about that. And if he can play good basketball, Kings fans are going to come back in droves. John in the chatty house over here, he can tell you that me and him have gone at it a couple times about Marvin, because I've been really down about Marvin.
John going at it with somebody? No.
I think I predicted Marvin's points per game and rebounds per game last year before the season, and it was really low, a lot lower than a lot of people. And me and John had a little bit of a discussion about it, and I love John for that. And I think I was within like a tenth of a point on it, even though I was a little bit dour about it. But I hope Marvin proves me wrong more than everyone else. I hope he shuts all of the Kings Herald up, because that's a good thing for the Kings. And at the end of the day, I'd rather root for a winner with Marvin than root for a loser, without him.
Why can't he do it here, though?
I think it would all be a mental thing more than anything. I think I legitimately think that's it.
Can
you fall back in love with a player? Can a player fall back in love with a city? I think that's the biggest thing.
Okay, and how, like, maybe you're not open to love right now if you're Marvin, because you've been hurt too many times. We know that Kenny's been hurt repeatedly, but he's open to love. Question with Marvin Bagley.
Marvin said, I'm working on me right now.
What can open Marvin's heart back up? And I think that I know what it is. Being healthy and playing well. And I do think, and this is a part I have a slight concern about, I do think there's I'm getting unfairly deep into Marvin Bagley's mind here, but I think there's a certain, he wants to feel valued on this roster. Like, he wants to be an important part. Like, I think the whole Team Bagley stuff started last year when the Kings were actually playing well, but Marvin wasn't a big part of, one of the recent games or one of the recent wins, and that fired off. What's that?
The fourth quarters. He wasn't a part of
the fourth quarter. Right.
Yes.
And so I think there's a certain, be healthy, play well. Hey, you're important here. Like, you're a valuable, we still think you are a core piece of what we were building 4 years ago. You could still be a core piece today. And I think there's still or you could still be a core piece moving forward. I think there's a certain level of, he wants to feel like he's a part of something here. And right now, and I don't, right now he's not, but I think if he plays well, he can become that again. And that that'll open up everybody's heart again and open up everybody's arms, and we'll all collectively embrace.
It's become almost a running joke, I feel like, on Twitter that and not necessarily for many of the writers or whatnot, because they want to see a winning team because they're tired of writing about a losing team. But there's a lot of people that it's easy to bash on Marvin Bagley. It's incredibly easy because you can point at 100 different things and be like, see, the Luka conversation will never leave Sacramento. And as long as Marvin isn't playing well, people aren't going to shut up about it. Probably me included. But part of that is also, Marvin goes out for 20 and 10 and plays 70 games. Sacramento's going to love him. Sacramento's going to bust their ass for him. They're going to all line up behind him. I mean, again, John can lead the charge. He can be the commander of the Marvin Bagley train, and I'll jump on it too. It's just a matter of Marvin's got to feel that love too. And I think that as long as he feels appreciated by the fan base, and as long as De'Aaron Fox pulls him aside and says, "Hey, we want you to get 20 tonight," and he realizes, like, okay, maybe I'm not the MVP of this team, but I accept that I'm willing to be the third best player on this team or the fourth best player on this team. Then you've got a contract extension, somewhere in the works in the next year or so. And
look, maybe jumping out the window here, but
oh boy, he's definitely jumping out the window.
No parachute.
If he can accept that and focus on, I'm just going to be the best Marvin Bagley that I can be for this team.
Sure.
I believe he'll play well. I think he'll get the opportunities. And ironically enough, if I was Doug Christie or anybody on Team Bagley, I'd say you can still get to that point where you're the second best player on this team. Like, I think if he put up 18 and 10, that's the second best player on this team.
Sure.
Tyrese ain't putting up 18 and 10 assists. Davion ain't doing that. Rashawn ain't doing that. If Marvin's going to give you 18 and 10 every night, that's the second best player on this team. I think that's a little ambitious for this year, but he can get to that point.
Shoot high. Shoot. I'm gonna go out there. I'm gonna be the best player on this team. You fall short and you wind up the second best. We were talking about that with defense earlier in the week. We're gonna go out there. We're gonna be the number one defense in the league. Okay. You fall short and all of a sudden you're 12th.
Yeah,
I'll take it.
Yeah, facts. That's
I'll take it.
There's a difference between ambition and arrogance as well, because Marvin came in thinking, to the league, saying that he was going to be the MVP of the league. And like, okay, like some of that is you got to hype yourself up a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
We all do that, but also like you have to understand if you're the fourth best player on this team, or this Marvin, maybe the fifth or sixth or seventh or whatever he is, he should aim for that number one spot. And until he is that number one spot, he should know that he's the fifth or sixth or seventh. He's not the first chair violinist right now. He should aim for it, but as you don't get to the league by being coy. And Marvin is in no way coy.
I was able to glean the context, but that is not a reference I'm familiar with.
Oh, in band, I'm not a band nerd, but I had a bunch of family that were. But like the first chair is like the best cellist or the best violinist or whatever.
It's De'Aaron. De'Aaron's first chair violinist. Yeah,
he is the first chair violinist. And if Marvin is the sixth chair violinist and he wants to get that first chair, he's going to have to earn it. He can't just accept that he is in his mind and sit in the sixth chair and pout about it.
Kenny is the first chair violinist of the show.
Look, guys, I'm more of a head of the table type guy. Okay. That's my bag.
I'm the guy who cleans Kenny's table.
Sure.
I get that.
Paul Heyman.
Yeah, I am the advocate, sir, for the head of the table here on Kenny Caraway. Will Griffith with us here on D-Lo and KC. So as you stated clearly, D-Lo and KC will wear you down.
Yeah.
We're a couple of days into practice. We're through media day. Everybody's saying the right things. There's really no reason to look down on this team. I mean, optimism is likely as high as it's ever going to be. We're going to come back on Monday, and optimism is either going to be higher or it's another year we stink. Like, it's probably going to be all over the place after that first preseason game. But your D-Lo and KC influenced opinion. Like, what is your honest impression of the team list here? Do you think they're competing for a postseason spot?
I think we're in a very similar spot as last season. I think we're going to be pushing now. if we can change 2 9-game losing streaks to 6-game losing streaks, and
which is just the worst barometer in the world. Like, gosh, that is so
I
sad.
would have no
But
success.
I mean, your point is very, very valid, but it's still very, very sad.
the Kings were also an incredibly healthy team last year, and if we can weather whatever injuries are coming, because let's face it, somebody's going to get injured, and somebody important will get hurt at some point in the season, unless we are incredibly lucky.
And it's not just injuries. I mean, COVID's not over. Like,
No, absolutely not.
there's still going to be protocols to deal with there in that case.
You're 100% right in that, and I think we're aiming for sub 40 wins. If I were a betting man, I would say it's sub 35. I'm fairly low, but that being said, I think this team has a much higher ceiling than last year too. You know, we have to pray. We're in a point now as Kings fans where we have to pray that some team above us, Ja Morant, goes down with an injury, or Steph Curry hurts an ankle or an Achilles or something. We're hoping that some of these teams, the Clippers, are wildly underperform just to get to
that's what we hope for. We don't hope for injuries. We just hope they suck.
Yeah,
I hope Dame plays 82 games and the team stinks.
Yeah, I hope he shoots 0%. But you know, the Kings are still sitting at a spot where they may have to hope that somebody goes down.
No. And that happens. Like, I mean, like that's going to happen through the course of a season, whether and you know, not necessarily talking about, you know, like a catastrophic injury, but you know, Steph's not going to play 82 games. I'm almost certain of it. Steph's not going to play 82 games. We know Klay's not going to play 82 games. Hell, right now the marker for Andrew Wiggins is 41. So, like, these are all things that we're gonna. We'll see what the Timberwolves winds up happening with them. The New Orleans Pelicans, what winds up happening. But that's just part of the story. You know, we were talking about storytelling when you joined us, Will. That's part of the storytelling of a season. There's going to be injuries. There's going to be hiccups. There's going to be away from personal reasons. You might get a Kyrie Irving. I'm just away from the team because I need a break. You know, from a particular player in the Western Conference. But I think with the Kings team as it's constructed, my hope has been hovering around that. I would just be so ecstatic for 41 and 41, but hovering around that 40 win mark, even if it's 40 and 42. I even have gone as far as say, I assuming they lost the play-in game, I would take 41 and 41 in the 10th spot, which is outrageous, over 35 and, you know, whatever the number is in a play-in spot.
I do think that the Kings are also loaded in such a way that they're one move away from being a 50-win team. I don't know if that's against anything else I've said other than us winning 35 games, but I think
you've said they're incomplete, so the right move, sure.
Yeah, I think the right move, you take your universal deal and you swap it for a guy who's around an all-star level player, or give up a couple extra picks for that. And I think Fox having a healthy season and being 3 pounds under the playing weight of Russell Westbrook, that's a big deal. And if he can play 72 games with his now stacked body, hell yeah. You know, you got somebody like Halliburton who is in his second season. And if he can, you know, play those minutes and avoid the sophomore slump, I think you add one more alpha to this team, and the Kings could end up as a 6 seed, and we're sitting pretty.
They're going to the postseason, Will. They're going to the postseason this year. This is the year the drought ends.
I hope you're right. I really hope you're right.
Will, tremendous catching up with you. It's been way too long. We'll have to catch you between witty write-ups over there at the Kings Herald for the game previews, and have you on more often when the Kings are doing well, and you could come on and say, man, I was wrong.
I hope
Mo Harkless is that dude, and he has been the guy to change everything for us, or you know, something outrageous like that.
I've prayed every year for 15 years to be wrong, guys, and this is the year I'm gonna be wrong.
This is
there we go. Yes, love it. Will, we appreciate you, man. Thanks as always for your amazing work over the Kings Herald, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.